Chapter 30. The Assault. The pain in Ino's leg had subsided to a dull throb. She knew a broken bone would seriously restrict her ability to fight back, but she had no choice in the matter. Ino knew what was coming and had no intention of going along with it quietly. She strained against her bonds while the enemy guards ignored her. Instead, the Destican soldiers talked among themselves. Ino tried to eavesdrop, but she did not understand the Destican language, save for a few words she picked up in training or from Axiom in the last couple of months. For a few moments, the unknowable conversation continued until one of the guards said a word Ino recognized. Jadogar. It took Ino a moment to recognize what she heard. The phrase had been wedged into the middle of a sentence, and Ino had no context cues to work with. But then, one of the other guards repeated the phrase, again in the middle of a sentence. And this time, Ino caught it. Jadugar was a proper noun in the Destican language, used to identify shaman. Ino remembered that Elodie's team had subdued a shaman during the final boarding action before Marathon crashed. Were they referring to him now, or someone else? Ino's pondering would have to wait. She heard the hiss of an automated door opening and closing. Then, all too suddenly, there he was. For the first time, Ino was face to face with Araj Zilfalin. The enemy leader looked down at the woman strapped to a stretcher on his bed, then spoke to the attending guards in that harsh voice Ino had come to know from his appearances aboard Marathon. Moving swiftly, the guards departed, leaving Ino and Araj alone in his private quarters. Araj leered at Ino, his orange eyes shining with greed. The Destican frigate Pranav descended toward Kailash's landing site. The enemy forces were still unaware of the fact the ship had been taken over and packed to the brim with armed rebels. Down in the hold, Prisbin ordered the Destican fighters to wear blue-colored bands around their arms and heads to tell friend from foe. On the bridge, Elodie spoke to Nagini.
"You're already a Destican. Why did Antipov have to abuse you too?" "It's been so long since the days of religious patriarchy on Earth that we're starting to forget," Nagini commented. "Those ideas never left Dicronia." "So women are still subordinate to men in Destican society?" Elodie asked. "That's an understatement," Nagini replied. "Little more than chattel slaves, in truth. The spirit of the universe commands us to bear young for the strongest of men, and to serve without question."
Nagini held up her hands in the air quotes gesture, and Elodie could briefly see a trace of the human Nagini used to be.
"Spirit of the universe?" Elodie repeated. "Centermost point of the Destican religion and culture," Nagini said. "In short, stellar phenomena such as wormholes and astral rifts are not only sentient, but divine beings to be worshipped. The Destican people were selected to be the enforcers of the universe's divine will, and all others are but tools to that end. Supposedly, some divine aspect of the universe selected the novella to rule with divine authority. Fealty to the novella is submission to the spirit of the universe."
A Destican man, still wearing the nondescript rags of the enslaved population, stepped over to Nagini and tapped her on the shoulder. In a meek voice, he said, "When you mention the novella, you're meant to say, 'May he live forever.'"
"Why?" Nagini snapped at him. "I am a free human. Or at least I still have the mind of one by some grace of God. Why should I talk like a slave? I don't want him to live forever, nor do I think he actually will do so."
Elodie gave Nagini a pat on the back. From the captain's chair, Antipov called out, "Here we go."
3 minutes to landing. Everyone make ready.
Inside the wreckage of the Marathon, Sota Beninato was defending the ship from a fresh Destican assault. By now, he had rallied the crew. Out of the original 3,500 humans who started this journey, Sota now had roughly 2,200 under arms throughout the ship, their numbers augmented by the surviving members of Ryland's crew, bringing his force up to nearly 2,600. Sota did not know the full extent of Axiom's plan, but he was able to guess it. All of the remaining Destican warships were now landed on the ground, and their crews were drunk with what they assumed to be victory. Araj Zilfalin thought he had won, but he was terribly wrong. Once the people from the slave ship Tenasilsi arrived, as well as the remaining Savanti frigates, and possibly the Caravaneer crews and the local Savanti authority came here as well, Araj and his forces would be horribly outnumbered. Their only advantages were the weapons of their starships and the crippled shaman at Sota's feet. 2 military androids had found the wounded shaman in the wreckage of Deck 6 and brought him to the antimatter reactor, where Sota had made his temporary headquarters. For a brief moment, Sota flashed back to his childhood, to the days living as part of a criminal gang in the dark corners of Singapore. He remembered how the Triad bosses would strategically select those who would become hostages, and those who would never be seen again. The shaman stirred, groaning in a way that suggested he was in pain. Sota unholstered his pistol. "Can you speak, Destican? Do you understand English?" The shaman moaned again and said something in Destican. Sota turned to face the comms officer, who was sitting nearby with her right arm in a sling. She shook her head and squinted her eyes at the shaman. "Something about it being too quiet," Indungane said. "And you're sure you heard it right?" Sota asked. Indungane shook her head. "I only picked up enough Destican to get back to the human embassy if I ever got lost in their territory. I can't even do small talk in that language, let alone hold a conversation." Sota turned to the military androids. "Did the enemy react when you took him?" One of the androids nodded. "Enemy forces mounted a substantial rescue effort," it said. 4 of my comrades were taken offline by gunfire, and 2 human crew members were killed in the fight as well. 11 Desticans were killed in the attempted rescue of this one before they fell back in a reluctant manner. Sota looked down at the shaman, who was twitching convulsively. "So, he's just as important to them as I figured," Sota said to himself. "Tie him up and lock him in the vault over there." For once, Ino was able to think clearly, despite the shooting pain from her broken leg. Seeing Araj, being alone in a room with her, was acting on her brain like some sort of tonic. She found focus. "At long last, the spirit of the universe has brought you to me, just as my forces stand on the brink of victory," Araj said to Ino. He stood at one side of the bed and reached down, brushing his hand across Ino's torso. She struggled against the straps holding her to the medical stretcher, and, in her fear, she felt as though the stretcher sank a little into the bed, although that was happening because Araj was putting his weight on it. "I will claim this planet as my own, the first in my new fiefdom," Araj said. "And you, who has captured my dreams and desires for so long, will be the first and most favored of my harem." Ino spat on his hand. Araj snarled and hit her face. She glared defiantly up at him. "What?" she said. "Didn't see that coming? What happened to your supernatural showcase? Can't read my mind anymore?" She was trying to make him angry, to provoke him into doing something foolish. She must have hit a nerve because Araj responded by grabbing Ino's throat. She choked and spluttered.
If your people have harmed my shaman, I will make you watch as I slaughter them. His power is the will of the cosmos themselves, and every day you fail to learn our ways is another day of punishment for your insolence." Ino's eyes widened in realization. Araj did not have any supernatural powers. It was the shaman. Ino knew where the shaman was, and so long as he was kept away from Araj, her foe would be deprived of telepathy. A small sensation of triumph went through Ino's body when she thought about telepathy without experiencing the instinctual rejection of it. Then she refocused her mind. If Araj really was unable to read her mind right now. "But how can I learn your ways if I don't understand you?" Ino had switched languages. She was now speaking exclusively in Esperanto. She saw the flicker of fury in Araj's face. "What's the matter? Only learned one human language? Did you think we only let English speakers go into space?" Ino was trying her hardest to provoke him. She knew that Araj wanted to rape her, but both her outfit and the restraining straps were proving temporary obstacles. At minimum, Araj would need to loosen or undo the strap drawn across her thighs. Then he would need to find a way to open or otherwise defeat Ino's flight suit. She would have a window, a narrow window of just a few seconds to do something. But what? Ino had no idea. She was making this up as she went along, but it was better than being idle, better than letting this happen. She had no idea if anyone was coming for her. For all she knew, everybody aboard the Marathon was dead. But there was a chance that some of her people were still alive and still fighting. "I've got hope. That's all I need," Ino told herself. Ino was pulled back to reality by a mixed sensation of pain and pressure. Araj was starting to grope her. "It matters not," he said. "I have what I want at long last." Ino felt a powerful sense of revulsion building up in her stomach. The feeling of his hands on her chest and belly was like fire, and that fire pushed away all other pain. Araj leaned forward, grabbed a handful of Ino's hair, and forced her to kiss him. Ino screamed into his mouth and retched as his foul cadaver breath hit her lungs. In the chaos of the moment, Ino lost track of one of Araj's hands. A moment later, he was gripping her inner thigh. Then, quite suddenly, she heard a click and whirring sound of a strap retracting into the spool on one side of the stretcher. Ino's legs were free. The most powerful adrenaline rush Ino had ever experienced in her life hit her like a ton of bricks. The time had come to choose between fight or flight, and Ino saw only one way out. Screaming shrilly, Ino started trying to free her arms. Araj seemed to figure out what was going on and let go of her thigh, but it was too late. Ino had gotten her right hand free of the strap holding it, but not without cost. Ino had taken a lot of skin off the top of her hand when it slid out of the restraint. And as blood seeped down her arm, Ino reached up and grabbed Araj by one of the curved horns growing from his forehead. "How dare you!" Araj shouted. "I liked you better when you were a hallucination!" Ino screamed. Ino and Araj grappled with one another. The stretcher twisted beneath her as they fought, and a terrible sound of crunching, combined with a whole new kind of pain, told Ino she had just broken another bone. Ino screamed and held onto Araj with all her might, knowing that the second she let go would mean rape, slavery, death, and everything in between. An alarm sounded, filling the room with a shrill noise. Araj let out an angry roar and started trying to push Ino away as the door to his quarters swung open. There was shouting, more shoving, and finally an explosive blast so loud that Ino thought she had gone deaf. Ino fell back into the bed. Araj had released her at last, stepping into the hallway with his soldiers, who were talking in panicked voices. Ino tried to take a deep breath, and a searing pain radiated out of her belly. She sat up as best she could with the medical straps drawn tightly across her chest and stomach, then looked down at a red splotch slowly growing in size across the front of her flight suit. Ino had been shot. Aboard the wrecked Marathon, Sota watched smoke curling up from the hull of the Destigan frigate Ambika. Good effect on target! Again! Axiom gave the signal, and a team of military androids aimed and fired one of Marathon's mass driver cannons. The blast shook the air like a thunderstorm while Destigan soldiers on the ground scattered in panic. Sota turned to Axiom. "This is it," Axiom said. "It is all in your hands now." "You picked the right man for the job," Sota said grimly. "Axiom, you have the con." "Understood, sir," the android replied. "Good luck." The deception had worked perfectly. The enemy allowed the Pranav to land less than 100 feet away from Kailasha. As the boarding ramp lowered into place, a group of Destigan soldiers ran toward it, screaming, "The humans are counterattacking! You need to take off again and hit them from above!" From inside the Pranav came a yell. "For Earth! For home! For Esperanta!" Prispin Volant charged down the ramp, armed with a magnetic rifle and shouting Pathfinder war cries. He was followed by nearly 400 Destigans. Prispin, Elodie, Hermione, Ashok, Nagini, Antipov, and Rylan achieved such total surprise that the enemy did not know what was happening until hundreds of escaped slaves, all armed to the teeth, started charging up Kailasha's boarding ramp. Elodie and Prispin were the first two coalition fighters to board Kailasha. "Find the prisoners!" Elodie ordered. Prispin took a team of fighters and moved out. They had barely gone more than a dozen paces before taking contact. Plasma rifles and magnetic weapons snapped and cracked in the cold darkness. Sparks filled the air as Elodie dove for cover. "Use stun bombs!" Elodie shouted to her marines. "We've got friendlies on this ship. Check your fire and PID your targets." Down in the lower decks, Prispin and his crew stormed ahead. "Marathon crew!" Prispin yelled. "Marathoners, can you hear me?" A voice cried out in reply, and Prispin quickly found himself outside of what must surely pass for a brig on Destigan vessels. Antipov used a magnetic rifle to smash the lock and break the door open. 7 familiar faces emerged. Acting Ensign Yamada, Engineer Kazuki, Navigator Raha, Boatswain Hamilton, and Marine Agdashlu all took the weapons they were offered. Astro Creator Azarin and Chaplain Oliver were escorted to safety. "7 down, 1 to go," Prispin said. "Where's Ino?"
As you're on your way back home, something catch your eyes untold. Fear of darkness lingers here. You tremble as you get the fear. Now you're on the cornerstone, fearing you'd be left alone.